any more unexpected delays from here on in would, I think, be stretching the patience, certainly, of the public, but also would have, ramifications for that upsurge in patronage across the network as a whole.
Council will discuss City Rail Link at its Budget Committee meeting this Wednesday. To sport now, and the White Ferns will be boosted by the return of all-rounder Amelia Kerr for tomorrow's second T20 International against Pakistan in Dunedin. Kerr has returned after playing the Big Bash final in Australia. The White Ferns suffered their first ever T20 loss to Pakistan yesterday, and batter Maddie Green concedes it was a below-par performance with both bat and ball.
From a bowling point of view, we need to make sure we hold the stumps for as long as we can and make them play the hard shots. And look, from a batting point of view, it's just how do we get going quicker? Be able to have a platform to finish off the last 3 or 4 overs with a bang, and lots to improve on, but that's okay. We know that Pakistan are a good side, and Tuesday's really important for us to win and go 1-1.
University Oval will be renamed Susie Bates Oval tomorrow in recognition of her having played 300 games for the White Ferns, a milestone she brought up earlier this year. All Blacks back Beauden Barrett has re-signed with New Zealand Rugby until the end of the next World Cup in 2027. Barrett will miss the next Super Rugby Pacific season, though he'll be eligible for All Blacks selection in 2024. And New Zealand squash player Paul Cole has his sights set on returning to world number 1. Cole reached the top ranking in early 2022 but dropped to number 5 at the beginning of this year. He's now number 4 and after winning the Hong Kong Open last night is set to continue his climb up the ladder. The 31-year-old returns home to play the New Zealand Open this week. That's the news.
Experts react to the decision to scrap the Lake Onslow hydro scheme.
They were only 6 months away from telling us what they thought the best solution to dry year risk is. So it seems short-sighted to can this project at the late stage.
The government says new clean energy will do the job.
We are starting work to reduce the consent timeframes for wind, solar, for geothermal.
But it wins the Fossil of the Day award at COP28 for reintroducing oil and gas exploration.
For our government to be backtracking on phasing out fossil fuels now is drawing a lot of criticism.
Electrifying news. Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Scattered rain today and showers tomorrow. Possible thunderstorms and hail during the afternoons and evenings. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain developing this afternoon with possible thunderstorms about the ranges, easing in Hawke's Bay tomorrow evening. Whanganui to Wellington, also for Wairarapa, mostly cloudy. A few light showers today and a few spots of rain about the Taradua district tomorrow morning. Nelson, Buller and Westland, scattered showers in Nelson and Buller, but fine in Westland. Mainly fine tomorrow, apart from isolated showers about the ranges. Marlborough and Canterbury, patchy drizzle, clearing tomorrow morning, then mainly fine. Otago and Southland, mainly fine, a few light coastal showers today. Fiordland, mainly fine, and for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few light showers today. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at about 20 past 5.
Ngā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The man accused of stealing COVID-19 data will stay behind bars tonight after he was denied bail in the Wellington District Court today. Te Whatu Ora says it's taken a number of urgent steps, including legal action, in light of the unauthorised disclosure and misuse of data by one of its staff members. 56-year-old Barry Young has featured in videos with conspiracy theorist Liz Gunn and appeared twice before Wellington District Court Judge Andrew Nichols today. Ruth Hill was in court and she joins us now. Kia ora, Ruth, what happened today?
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, Mr Young, who's an IT worker, he appeared in court this morning, as you've said, and he faces one charge of dishonestly accessing to Whatu Ora's databases. If found guilty, he faces 7 years in prison. So he's yet to enter a plea to that charge. But this morning the public gallery was extremely crowded with his supporters. It was quite a noisy affair to start with. We had Counterspin founder Calvin Alp, along with the former head of the anti-lockdown party Advance New Zealand, Billy Te Kahika Jr. They were among the crowd. for his brief appearance. The crowd gave Mr Young a standing ovation when he walked in with prolonged applause, which prompted the judge, Judge Nichols, to say, well, he was always pleased to see supporters in court. If they made any further interruptions, he would have to clear the gallery. So by the time he appeared again this afternoon, it was a much more subdued crowd for this afternoon's bail hearing. Now, under the Bail Act, media are actually prevented from publishing the details of the bail hearing. So other than the outcome and conditions imposed, I can't talk about it. But I can say that his lawyer, who's Matthew Haig, sought bail. He argued strongly for it. But Judge Nichols has denied bail until 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, when Mr Young will go free.
So what's Te Whatu Ora had to say about all of this?
Well, Te Whatu Ora said it found out about the breach on Thursday morning, and that was after an email was sent by an individual to a number of officials. It says the person behind the alleged breach had no clinical background or expert vaccine knowledge and appeared to be trying to spread misinformation. This data, it all relates to Covid-19 vaccinations. It appears to have been anonymised, so no personal information has been compromised as far as we know. The data has been taken down from an overseas website, and an Employment Relations Authority injunction is preventing it from being published elsewhere. Te Whatu Ora, they've resecured their systems, they have reset access codes, and they've got ongoing analysis, checking and scanning international media for any data that looks like it could have come from them. So the chief executive, Margie Apa, she's described this as a devastating breach of trust by an individual who was on a very small team. I'll just quote from her here. She says, what this individual is trying to claim about vaccines is completely wrong and ill-informed, and their comments demonstrate this. The person has no clinical background or expert vaccine knowledge. By chance, and separate to a prior COVID-19 vaccination, some people will experience new illnesses or even die from a pre-existing condition shortly after vaccination, especially if they are elderly. So Te Whatu Ora's position is that vaccine is safe and effective. And
So, Ruth, what happens next?
What happens next? Well, Barry Young, he's likely to plead at his next appearance, which is going to be December 18th. Te Whatu Ora says it's continuing to work closely with other agencies, including the National Cyber Security Centre, the Police, the Department of Internal Affairs and the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. Te Whatu Ora has confirmed that the individual at the centre of the alleged breach remains an employee while an employment investigation is underway, but he has no access to any systems or data since the breach was discovered on Thursday.
Thank you for that, Ruth. That's Ruth Hill, who was in court today for the appearance related to Te Whatu Ora data, the accusation that a former worker there, a worker has stolen it. It is 12 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Minister of Corrections is confident the country's jails will be properly staffed and able to take on as many prisoners as needed as the government gets tough on crime. National's coalition deal promises increased funding for corrections to ensure there is, quote, sufficient prison capacity as required. Right now, Aotearoa's jails are about 370 prison officers short. Mount Eden Jail is 62 staff short and Rimataka Prison is down 68 prison officers. The 18 adult jails have 11,000 beds, but staffing shortages mean they can only use about 9,250. As part of the government's 100-day work program, it is drafting new legislation to ban gang patches too and stop gang members gathering in public places. Mark Mitchell is the Corrections Minister and he's confident the department can get the staff it needs.
There'll be an ongoing recruitment drive to attract new corrections officers, and there's been some success with the recruitment drive that's been held this year, and that will carry on into the new year.
Not enough of a success, though. You're still about 370 prison officers short, aren't you?
We are, and that is a challenge without a doubt, but the team are up for that challenge. And so, like I said, we're going to continue with that recruitment drive and try and attract Kiwis into what is fundamentally a very important job, one that doesn't always get the public recognition that it deserves. They play a critical part in terms of public safety. And, of course, we're going to try and attract as many good candidates as we can.
They've already been trying to do that, Minister, and they can't fill the vacancies. So if you keep doing the same thing and getting the same result, you know what they say about that. So what are you going to do differently?
No, they're filling vacancies. They've had some good success with the recruitment drive, and we're just going to keep carrying on.
Not at the rate you need to, though, Minister, eh?
Well, yes, absolutely at the rate that we need to. So, but we need to continue it, and we need to continue to drive those numbers up and reach that target of 350.
The reality is you've got around 11,000 bed capacity in our jails, but at the moment you can use about 9,200 because you simply do not have the staff.
Yeah, so there is capacity in the system, and there's the ability to extend that capacity beyond the 9,256 open beds that we have at the moment and take it much closer to the 11,385 of the physical capacity that we have. So, look, there's a very high level of confidence inside corrections, and I've got confidence in them that we can continue with a successful recruitment drive, attract the best people that we can into the service, and deliver the capacity that's required.
Are you going to need that full capacity with your law changes and your tough on crime stance?
We don't know, but there is. It's fair to say that yes, there will be an increase in the prison muster. But it's difficult to model exactly what that's going to look like until we actually get underway.
Have you got any modelling to suggest what the muster will be?
There is some modelling there, and it varies between about 300 to 400 in the next 12 months. But like I said, we have to get our legislation passed. We have to actually start policing it. We have to start taking retail crime seriously and having some consequences wrapped around those recidivist offenders, and we'll see how the criminal world respond to that.
If those figures are anywhere near correct, you really are going to have to get your skates on to get some more prison officers. So I go back to my original question. How are you going to get them? They have been trying to recruit. They still have 370 vacancies. Are you going to put up, for example, wages?
Well, they've just been through a wage round, so they've sort of passed through that. But they're going to continue with a recruiting campaign, and that campaign has been successful. It's getting better. There's been lessons learned, and we're just going to be relentlessly focused on trying to recruit the best people that we can into what is a honourable service, and hope that we attract the people that we need.
That's all good intentions, but again, 370 prison officers short, despite an intensive recruitment campaign. And you think you're going to plug that gap by doing exactly the same?
Well, we have 350 officers that we need to recruit. I wouldn't say that the recruiting campaign that's been run up to date has been very successful. They are recruiting people. Retention is improving. The amount of officers leaving is starting to reduce. And so I've got every confidence that we're going to be able to recruit the people that we need to meet the demand.
100-day program, legislation to ban gang patches. Is that going to be under urgency, so no select committee?
No, that's not under urgency. So we'll go to the first reading and then we'll put that through a full select committee process.
So just tell me, the headhunter's funeral recently where there was a convoy from the top of the North Island to Foxton, your law changes will do what to that situation?
Well, number one, I just want to acknowledge the police and the way they handled that. It was an excellent operation. They had the right amount of resources. They had eagle overhead. The people of Foxton felt like the gang members weren't impeding on their freedom.
But how will you change it, issues. Minister? The way it was handled, how will things be differently with your law?
Well, in terms of how the police handled it on the day, I thought was outstanding, much better than the gang takeovers of Apotiki or Coromandel Township.
So why do you need a law change then?
But our law changes quite simply extend the police's powers and capabilities. Number one, to stop gangs from forming in big numbers in public. Number two, to break them up from the inside out in terms of the use of consorting laws. And we've been very clear that the gangs will no longer wear their patches or their gang insignia, which is quite clearly designed to intimidate and scare the communities that they're in.
So can I please get a yes or no answer? Under your laws, your proposed laws, there will be no more patched funeral convoys?
No, there will be no. Well, once we pass the law, it'll be illegal to wear a patch in public.
And that is the Corrections Minister, Mark Mitchell. Now, in breaking news, police investigating the death of baby Rue in late October are once again appealing for information on critical evidence taken from the Taita Street property. In a statement released a short time ago, police say items were deliberately removed from the Paul Street property and concealed or disposed of. They have released pictures of the items they are looking for, a swatch of a blue duvet cover, a CCTV system and the system's power backup. And police are also looking for anyone who may have seen the piece of beige fabric tied around baby Rue's neck when he was taken to hospital. They say attempts were also made to clean and alter the crime scene. A 1994 Nissan Sentra, registration TE6972, I'll give you that plate again, TE6972. It is a Nissan Sentra in 1994. It travelled to and from Paul Street on multiple occasions after baby Rue was taken to hospital and before the scene was secured. Now, we will put a link on our webpage which will show you photos of the items of interest that the police are seeking. That Nissan travelled to and from the Paul Street address 3 times, the police say, after Rue was taken to hospital on the 22nd of October and before police were able to secure the scene. Now, the police say they are continuing to piece together a timeline of the movements of persons of interest who are continuing to engage with, and they're also putting together a timeline of the movements of the car. The cooperation of our 3 people of interest is vital to us understanding the truth of what happened to baby Rue, they say, and ultimately holding those responsible to account. It is 20 past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Let us know your thoughts on staffing the country's prisons. 370 prison officers short, but they're expecting an increase in muster with this government's tough on crime stance. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time to go to the headlines now. Ko iwi anō tēnei.
The man accused of stealing the Whatu Ora Covid-19 data and using it to spread disinformation will be released on bail tomorrow afternoon. Barry Young, who is 56, appeared in the Wellington District Court charged with accessing a computer system for dishonest purposes. Corrections Minister Mark Mitchell says he's confident the country's 18 adult jails will be properly staffed. The jails are currently short of about 370 prison officers, and that means only 9,250 of the 11,000 prison beds can be used. Mr Mitchell admitted to Checkpoint that recruitment is a challenge. The head of Auckland's multi-million-dollar underground rail network is giving no guarantees that it will be open in 2026. Auckland councillors will discuss City Rail Link when they meet on Wednesday. The line will cost the city $220 million a year. Waka Kotahi is urging people to prepare for possible delays ahead of tomorrow's Te Pāti Māori nationwide protests over the new government's policies on co-governance and the treaty. The protests begin at 7 a.m. and are likely to affect the busiest transport routes across Auckland and the Terrace Tunnel in Wellington. The Coalition says it will deliver its mini-budget and half-year economic and fiscal update on December the 20th, laying out where it's found spending cuts. And the Department of Foreign Affairs says some 19 New Zealanders have now made it out of Gaza. 5 people escaped through the Rafah crossing into Egypt last night, on top of at least 14 who came through last month. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in the Hawke's Bay, State Highway 2 reopened for a few hours from 5 p.m. between Putorino and Kote Maori under stop-go management. It's open until 8 p.m. only. You'll need to be through the barrier points at Wairoa and Whirinaki by 7 p.m. to be sure of getting through by 8 o'clock. Our next traffic news and headlines are at about 20 to 6.
Kia ora rā e ho. Let's stick with the travel theme. Short of your own personal reindeer and sleigh, many of us will be relying on Air New Zealand to get us where we want to be this festive season. On Christmas Day alone, the national carrier is expecting to fly 30,000 passengers. Air New Zealand made it back into the black this year after a punishing period during the pandemic. But there are challenges on the horizon, including passenger disruptions next year due to unscheduled aircraft maintenance. Joining us now in the studio is CEO Greg Foran. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
One of the top questions people will be wanting to know, if they're flying domestically this festive season, are they getting a fair deal from Air New Zealand?
I think they are, Lisa. It's, a different environment than what we've seen previously, and we're dealing with cost pressures like everyone else is. We've seen OPEC come out just last week and say they're going to cut back production, so I'm not expecting to get any oil relief. And like everyone at home, we're seeing, things go up from dry cleaning to catering to airport landing charges. So our costs are up about 30%. And I think the pricing that we're seeing at the moment, which actually is down about 6.5% domestically, and that's according to New Zealand statistics, and that's what we're seeing internally as well, on about a year ago. But I'm expecting it to stay around there.
Okay, because let me give you an example. The week of December 18th, when lots of people will be finishing work, school's out, and they'll be on the move. Flying to Dunedin or Invercargill, you're looking about $900 up to $900 return. If you are flying a family of four, that is more than $3,500. That is flippin' expensive, isn't it?
Well, it is, Lisa. And, that works out to be, about $400, $430 or so single way.
Yeah.
I was doing a comparison because pricing often does come up in discussions, not just with yourself, but with lots of people. And people go, well, gee, Air New Zealand, you guys, you're running a bit of a monopoly. You have some of these routes to yourself. It's expensive to fly. $400 to go, one way, or $800, $900 to do a return. So I checked Australia and I had a look at the prices to get from, say, Sydney to Melbourne, which is literally exactly the same distance as it is from Auckland to Christchurch. You pay about $1,000.
But people live in New Zealand, Greg, and you are the national carrier, and you are back in black in epic proportions, right? So they look at the ticket price and they think you are gouging us.
And epic proportions means that we've guided for this half, Lisa, to make around about half the profit that we made last year. So I don't think the term epic proportions of profit is correct. And let's go back to the comment that I made. In Australia, with 4 airlines flying between Sydney and Melbourne, you're going to pay double the price if you book late to get on a Qantas flight as what you would pay for exactly the same distance flying in New Zealand. So, Air New Zealand does a pretty good job at keeping prices down. And I think we're very fair with what we charge. We're dealing with costs like everyone else. I do know that it is expensive, but relative to other airlines, we offer a pretty good deal.
Do you put the price up? Does Air New Zealand put the price up when there is an event? And people have pointed out Coldplay concert next year. They say before the concert was announced, there was tickets for $69 between Wellington and Auckland. After the concert was announced, they say prices went up to about $200 each way. So when you see an event on the calendar, when it's announced, do you adjust your pricing upward?
Well, no, we don't when there's an event. What happens with pricing is that as seats start to run out, then what happens is that the pricing algorithm kicks in and pricing does go up. If the Coldplay concert isn't a success, then the pricing will stay down because people won't be going there and, there won't be a shortage of seats. So it's not driven by an event, it's driven around...
It's driven by demand.
What sort of demand is occurring.
Yeah, and the demand is driven by an event. So the algorithm works to price more expensively if something is happening.
Well, it depends on the extent of the event and it depends how many, seats are available at that particular time.
And you think that's fair?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You don't run an airline based on saying, well, I'm going to get as many planes as I need for Christmas week. You base it on what you think you're going to need during the year, and at times you're going to be a bit under and at other times you're going to be a bit over. So I do think it's fair.
Okay, you mentioned international operators and what other people are paying. We chose a random week, which is March of next year, the 4th to the 12th, and we looked at Air New Zealand's prices compared to other airlines. To Bali, $738 Air New Zealand. Qantas, $1,294. LA, Air New Zealand, $1,741. Air Fiji, $952. Nandi on Air New Zealand, $837. Fiji Airways, $687. Chicago, Air New Zealand, $2,035. And American Airlines, $1,676. I could carry on the list. You are charging more than basically all these operators to fly the same route. Are you not competitive with those big players?
We are competitive and, as I said, fares have come down. And if you have a look at New Zealand Statistics Department, they've come down about 16.5%, and that reflects what we're seeing as well. There were some there that you mentioned. I can recall the one on Qantas you mentioned. I think we were considerably cheaper. There are others where we're slightly more expensive. There are others where we are maybe a couple of $100 more expensive. It will depend on how many seats are available on that particular day, on that particular flight. And I think most listeners know that. You get on that site and you can hunt around and you can find some flights that are considerably cheaper than others. And that plays out domestically and internationally. This isn't like heading down to a supermarket and buying Kellogg's cornflakes. It's more akin to, I guess, buying a fresh item which may go out of stock quickly. So prices will vary, but I would say to you that I'm pretty comfortable with where we sit with prices, and we need to be, because if we're not competitive, we can't fill the planes up.
At the start of this year, you told me that you expected prices to go down in about 18 months. That puts us at mid-next year. Do you stand by that forecast?
Look, once again, it will depend on what's happening. We didn't have an outbreak in the Middle East when we spoke earlier on this year.
No.
So what you're now seeing, as I mentioned, is that OPEC have come out. They've, said we're going to cut production. Fuel's a big part of our bill.
So do you reckon it's going to go in the opposite direction, Greg?
Possibly. Who knows? It's very hard to predict. This is an industry where you're continuously dealing with factors quite often outside of your control.
Have you got all your planes out of the desert?
We do. We've had them actually all out for a year now.
So you've got maintenance on some planes, which is unexpected, through no fault of your own. You said earlier that you were looking at leasing more planes for more capacity. Are you doing that?
That's exactly right. So we do actually have a plane that we leased from Cathay Pacific. That plane has been flying now for a week. We're busy looking at more planes.
How many more?
2 to 3 more, and we'll continue to progress through with those negotiations. As you can imagine, what's happening in the airline world is not just Boeing, but Airbus, and not just the airframe manufacturers, but also those manufacturers that make engines like Rolls-Royce and GE. They're all struggling to get some of their supply chain back up and running. So what that means is that new plane deliveries have been delayed, and it means that people who lease planes now have plenty of demand. So we've got to get out there in the market and fight to get these planes.
We're almost out of time. Couple of quick things. Cyclone Gabrielle still causing problems on the region's road. Mangamukas in Northland are closed. Brynderwyns are going to close, potentially for a couple of months next year. Can you do something for that region? People locally have been asking about Kaitaia flights and whether you will change your schedule.
Yeah, short term, no. And the reason for that is we've got right at the moment 4 planes, 4 beautiful Airbus, what we call A321 planes with over 200 seats on them, sitting on the ground here in New Zealand that can't fly because we've got those engine challenges. Those 4 planes will soon go to 5. So we're a bit short at the moment, and whilst I would love to be able to expand that network domestically, I won't be able to do that until we get through this engine issue, and that's probably going to be 2 years.
Okay, and before you go, what value of COVID credits are you still carrying?
About 200 million. People are moving through those. Obviously, once we extended the deadline by 2 years, which we did several months ago, then people stopped using them quite so actively. We'll start ramping up the campaign for that as we get closer to cut-off time.
Are you making it as easy as possible to use them?
Yeah, we are, Lisa. I think we've done a good job of letting people, use those on any flight, to be able to use them and boost up the fare using cash if they want to be able to transfer that credit to someone else. I think we've been really sensible with how we've managed that.
Before you go, growth areas, any additional routes for next year that we don't already know about?
No, we're pretty focused on the ones that we're doing and doing those particularly well and making sure that what we do at the same time is deliver a really good product for the customer. So, lots of new things we've been working on, not just getting the airline restarted, whether it was improving the app or improving some digital capability out there, working on new uniforms, new snacks, plenty of new things happening.
Snacks and uniforms. I'm betting that people would rather cheaper airfares than snacks and new uniforms.
Well, I think what they want is actually both. So our objective here is to make sure we deliver a great all-round performance.
Thank you for your time, Greg. Really appreciate it. That is Air New Zealand CEO Greg Foran. The boss of Auckland's long-anticipated underground rail network is giving no guarantees it will hit its opening deadline of 2026. It has suffered several budget blowouts and will cost the city $220 million a year once it opens. Auckland Council's Budget Committee is meeting this week to look at increasing rates to meet unavoidable cost pressures brought on by the City Rail link. The city's mayor is proposing an 8% rates increase for the financial year 2026 to 2027 as part of the council's 10-year budget to soften the blow of the City Rail link costs. Finn Blackwell has more.
The promise of an underground network stretching out from Auckland's city centre has been on the cards for 7 years now. But City Rail Link boss Sean Sweeney told 9 to Noon the target opening date of 2026 could be just out of reach.
We have a contract completion date of late November 2025, and that is what we call a P50 date. We always work to P50s, and that means it has a 50% probability of being met and a 50% probability of not being met. That's the date we're working to.
He says there's still a huge amount of testing that needs to take place before the underground can be opened to the public.
We're responsible basically for handing over a railway that is able to be operated by Auckland Transport. Once we've handed it over, they have to do a fair amount of work learning how to operate it so that it's ready for public operations.
Not just that, they would need to add years to guarantee an opening date with certainty.
If people wanted a guarantee, you'd have to put years onto that date. If people wanted a locked-in guarantee that was certain to be achieved, and that would be unwise.
But John Reeves from the Public Transport Users Association says Aucklanders are keen to see the rail network open.
I think all of Auckland is just eager for it to open, and it would be great if City Rail Link Limited can somehow pull finger and deliver what the city needs.
He says it could be time for the government to step in.
Maybe the government needs to step in here and really put some close scrutiny on City Rail Link Limited and see why it's constantly missing deadlines, because every day it's not operational, it's costing the city and the taxpayers a lot of money, and we need to get this open ASAP to alleviate congestion across Auckland.
The Ratepayers Alliance has also hit out on the delays, calling the project a symbol of financial incompetence. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown is looking to put up rates by 8% in year 3 of the 10-year budget to cushion the blow of City Rail Link costs coming in. The Ratepayers Alliance says even if the proposed rates increase for the underground's expected opening were to go through, it would take the annual rates of about 72,108 ratepayers just to cover the network's $220 million a year running costs to the city. Auckland Councillor and Chair of the Transport Committee, John Watson, says any delays from the project would try passengers' patience.
Any more unexpected delays from here on in would, I think, be stretching the patience, certainly, of the public, but also would have, ramifications for that upsurge in patronage across the network as a whole.
The council will discuss the City Rail Link at its Budget Committee meeting on Wednesday.
It is 23 minutes to 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa e nainei, ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins me in the studio. Nona, businesses are taking a wait-and-see approach to the change of government. What does the latest survey tell us?
Okay, so this is a survey by a business advisory firm, Grant Thornton. They say that they've interviewed a number of people in business. 73% were somewhat optimistic, but, a quarter were still not sure. And one of the big things that's going on there is that they're worried about red tape. So yes, the government's come in, a new government, they're promising all sorts of nice bells and whistles for business, but The red tape is what's really driving businesses crazy. It's an old story, and it's always got a new edge on it. And regulation's a big issue for business.
But they're getting a red tape minister. Well, actually, they've got a red tape minister.
They do. But whether or not he's got some scissors with him, who knows?
Okay, so wait and see. Shall we talk about the insurer Tower? Now, it is reviewing its ownership structure. I mean, what does that mean for people?
Yeah, well, this is a company that, recently they announced a full year net loss of $1 million. And they've quit their rural business. They talked about the catastrophic events of 2023, which, was the Auckland flooding, the North Island flooding, and, of course, the damage caused by Cyclone Gabriel. These are really big ticket items. We heard from bigger insurance companies that were really struggling with that. So now, without adding additional comment to their market release today, they said that they are now they're reviewing their ownership structure. We don't know if that means that their big shareholder might want to take over the business. We don't know if that means they want to, delist from the market. We've got no sense of what that really means. But they're also looking at how they can become more competitive. So that must be another issue. For insurers, the big question marks around climate change and what that means in terms of bigger, badder events that might cause more money. And then we also know that the government themselves are talking about, how you can mitigate climate change. Well, the insurers are left wondering where their business is at. So this review is going to take a few months. They're not planning to comment at all about what this is going to mean to the business. But I can tell you that the market itself didn't think much of it because their share price was marked down 1.7%. Just because you were talking to Air New Zealand, they were down 0.75%. But overall, unusually, the NZX ended steady with Friday, like no change. So, it changed through the day, but in the end,
yes, ultimately,
it was the same number it closed at. On Friday, it closed at today, 11,368. So despite some of these, there was a lot of ups and overs. They said downs. Look at these ones here. So Asia prices were also mixed. Gold has spiked to $2,100 an ounce. So that's because people are unsure about where the U.S. dollar is going. But the New Zealand dollar, it was hanging on there at 61.9 U.S. cents, 93.1 Australian, 48.6 British pence. We're going to hear from the Reserve Bank of Australia. I think it is tomorrow. That might make a bit of a difference. But yeah, right now there is a lot of question marks in the market. And of course, it is the last few weeks before the end of the year.
It is indeed, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier with business news there. It is 19 minutes away from 6 and you with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Do get in touch. Let us know your thoughts on the direction this government's headed in with the Department of Corrections. 370 prison officers short. They're pushing to get more of them. They expect the prison muster to increase. And also our discussion with CEO Greg Foran from Air New Zealand. He says New Zealanders are getting a fair deal on domestic airfares. What are your thoughts? 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Labour's finance spokesperson Grant Robertson is rubbishing coalition government claims that he found ways to make the government books look better than they are. Finance Minister Nicola Willis is accusing the previous government of committing to several long-term programs, but only funding them for the short term. In Indonesia, 11 climbers have been found dead after yesterday's eruption of the Merapi volcano in West Sumatra. There were 3 survivors. 12 climbers are still missing, but the search for them has been temporarily halted amid safety concerns. The Health and Disability Commission is considering whether Gisborne hospital staff should face disciplinary charges over a man who says he was humiliated while trying to discreetly seek preventative HIV medication. In its report, the man says he turned up to the emergency department after having unprotected sex, but was loudly and rudely questioned in front of other patients before being told to go to a GP. Cordons around central Wellington's Brandon Street and Fitzherbert Terrace have been lifted. They were imposed after suspicious packages were found outside the US and Israeli embassies. Neither package turned out to have posed any risk.
And it could be several months yet before September's sewer collapse in Parnell, central Auckland, is fixed. The collapse opened a large sinkhole. Parnell Business Association's Cheryl Adamson says the work's unlikely to be completed before the end of March. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, if you're travelling on State Highway 2 in the Hawke's Bay, you still have just under 2.5 hours to get through Putorino and Kote Mauri under stop-go management. The road will close again at 8 p.m. tonight as they try to clear that slip. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Ngā mihi, Evie. New All Blacks coach Scott Robertson has received an early Christmas present, with All Blacks back Beauden Barrett re-signing until the end of 2027. Barrett's contract extension makes him available for the next Rugby World Cup, potentially giving him a fourth shot at the title. We're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. OK, what does locking Beauden Barrett in for 4 more years mean for New Zealand rugby?
In the short term, it actually gives the All Blacks some options at first 5. This was a position that was looking quite lean. If we think that Rugby World Cup All Black Richie Mo'unga had already signed on for 3 years in Japan, so this was a stint which would make him unavailable for the All Blacks. So with Scott Robertson coming into the job and probably looking for some experience to fill in those gaps, by locking in Beauden Barrett after he's finished his second stint in Japan playing for Toyota Verblitz. So he finishes that up, comes back to New Zealand and can be straight into the All Blacks and supporting a new coach in a position where it is quite a pivotal role, obviously, in a team. So to have some experience there, he's got 123 caps, so that's not bad to call on. Although he gets straight back into the All Blacks, he will actually miss Super Rugby next year. Sits out a year there, but in 2025 it's good news for the Blues. He's back playing Super Rugby in Auckland. In today announcing this, it was a lot to do with what he can offer on and off the field. It was the New Zealand Rugby CEO, Mark Robinson, pointed out leadership qualities. Scott Robertson described him as a classy player and has pointed out the loyalty to New Zealand, which has given them this knowledge and experience. The Blues CEO, Andrew Hoare, says Beauden is one of rugby's good people and treats everyone with respect. And it was also the input that he's had into the Blues social and community projects like their COVID and flood response, which has come a lot of that off-field stuff that is quite important to a club that Beauden has offered quite a lot too. And I think it's a lot of that added value in this long-term deal is what they might be getting, because really, Beauden Barrett's probably not going to be your first choice, first 5 and 4 years of the next World Cup, but he has a role to play in mentoring these players who are actually coming through.
Let's talk about the future of the Commonwealth Games. It's taken another hit.
It has. So the hosting for the 2026 Commonwealth Games hit a roadblock today. The Gold Coast is the latest city to withdraw their option for this. They'd put together a little bit of a bid with Perth. This was seen as Gold Coast hosted the Games in 2018. Yep. They've got the facilities. They've got the way to do that there. They'd put in a bid with Perth, so it would be split between the Gold Coast and further up across to Perth. That was $700 million. So originally, regional Victoria in Australia was to be the host for the 2026 Games. They withdrew with budget overruns. So the Gold Coast Mayor is saying that no support from state or federal government is the reason why they can't continue on with this bid. But it puts the Commonwealth Games in a little bit of a tight spot.
It's a poison chalice, it seems, at the moment. Well, nobody wants it.
Yeah, exactly. When regional Victoria pulled out, New Zealand said, no, we're not stepping in for 2026, even though there were some murmurings out of Christchurch about the want to do that. So it's going to be interesting because 2030 is also looking for a host after Canada's Alberta also pulled out.
OK, let's put it to the people. 2101 on text. Should New Zealand host a Commonwealth Games? This one or the next one? Thank you, Felicity. Felicity Reid, sports reporter. It is 13 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The new Finance Minister is accusing her Labour predecessor of finding clever workarounds to hide the true state of the government's finances. Nicola Willis has also confirmed the coalition government will deliver its mini budget on December 20th. Speaking from the Beehive, Ms Willis said she was aware the previous government had committed to a number of long-term policies, but it only funded them for the short term. But having now looked under the hood, Ms Willis says it is clear the Labour government upheld the letter of the law, not its spirit.
It is absolutely permissible for a government to only short-term fund a program. That is allowed. But where you know that you will have to go back to fund it in future budgets, then actually you should just be funding it for the long term. Farmax, one example, school lunches are another. I knew about those before the election. What surprised me is how many more of those there are.
Ms Willis says she is still waiting for advice on how many essential initiatives would soon run out of funding, but initial advice, she says, suggests billions of dollars over the forecast period could be needed to cover the cost of them. Ms Willis says this has prompted her to consider changes to the Public Finance Act.
I would think it's appropriate in future pre-election fiscal updates that there be collected in one place a list of all of the programs, all of the policies for which funding falls off a cliff in future years, so that anyone looking at that can scrutinise it and determine whether they think that's responsible.
And responding a short time ago, Labour's finance spokesperson Grant Robertson has rubbished the accusations.
What I've just heard from Nicola Willis is a desperate diversion from somebody who can't make their tax package add up. She's been in the job of opposition finance spokesperson for close to 2 years. If she can't read and understand what is in the budget document, then I am deeply concerned at how she's going to do the job of finance minister.
And that was Labour's Grant Robertson speaking at Parliament a short time ago. It could be several months before a broken sewer in central Auckland is fixed. Work on a sewer line in Parnell that collapsed and opened a massive sinkhole won't begin until early next year. Nearby businesses have endured loud noises and unpleasant smells since the line broke in September. Felix Walton has more.
A subtle stench hangs in the air on St George's Bay Road in Parnell. Loud machinery pumps sewage uphill as workers supervise a big hole that used to be a car park. Parnell Business Association manager Cheryl Adamson says it's been a big headache for the nearby shops and cafes.
Part of the lower end of St George's Bay Road, one lane is still completely closed. And where they've erected the pump house is quite noisy, even though they've tried some noise mitigation. It's almost for the retailers that are right adjacent that space. It's like having a generator on all day.
The sinkhole opened up in late September when the sewer line collapsed. In the months since, Cheryl Adamson says businesses have learned to live with it.
I mean, there are odours from time to time, certainly not all the time. It kind of wafts in and wafts out. Businesses have just accepted that this is a massive operation and Watercare are doing the very best they can.
And live with it they will. Watercare says the repairs won't begin until early next year, once a critical part has been flown in from overseas. Once the work starts, Cheryl Adamson says it could take months.
The biggest challenge now is to get the boulders up out of the actual pipe. Once that's out, they've then got to put lining inside the pipe. So the estimates we've been given is completion end of March.
The pumping station is right in front of Sachi's kitchen, a cooking school. One of the staff, John, says the site's sounds and smells are a bit distracting.
Sewage, open dumpster smell, but thankfully it comes out during the night. The noise is the most inconvenient part of it, especially when we're holding classes here.
Mansi, a worker at Tile Space, worries the smell could get worse before it gets better.
It's quite smelly. Around the summer it's probably going to get worse with the smell and stuff. It would be nice if they can get it done sooner, but I understand, it's fine, I guess.
She says the disruption is confusing customers.
A lot of people think that we're closed. We've tried to make sure that we put it out there that we're not closed, but quite a few people ring being like, are you guys still open? Because that road looks like it's closed down.
Cheryl Adamson is worried the same thing could happen elsewhere in Auckland.
Probably our biggest underlying concern is the ageing infrastructure under particularly older suburbs such as Parnell and perhaps even Ponsonby and other areas around the city, because Parnell also suffered really badly with the floods in January, and part of that was also due to ageing infrastructure.
She says Auckland Council and Watercare need to bring the city's infrastructure up to modern standards.
Now, Watercare says the bypass pumping solution is working well and there haven't been any overflows related to the Oraki main sewer since October 26. Some parts needed for the repair are being manufactured in Dubai and are expected to arrive in the country before the new year, which will allow the installation to begin in early January. It says it's doing everything it can to minimise disruption for local businesses. Now, that includes traffic management and signage. There's an enclosure over the temporary pump station at St George's Bay Road, which reduces any noise or odours, and the sinkhole site is also covered to suppress any smells. The end-of-year school prize giving, it's known to send a shiver up the spine of a few parents, a couple of bum-numbing hours, waiting, if you are lucky, to clap your child onto stage full of pride and anticipation. The reward, outside of basking briefly in the greatness by association, is usually a pretty solid group performance of some sort. But this year's big number at the St Andrews College prize giving was an absolute showstopper. 120 singers and musicians on stage, bringing down the house, and you may recognise the tune. Pretty impressive, and the lead singer there was Year 13 student Grace Burnett, lead guitarist Mia Fraser, also a Year 13 student. The acoustic guitarist was Year 12 student James McIver. Well, joining us now is St Andrews College Head of Music, Duncan Ferguson, and guitarist James McIver. Hi to both of you. Duncan, what is this? Go big or go home?
Oh, we always try to do that here. Unfortunately, sometimes we bite off more than we can chew, but this time it seems to have come off pretty well.
James, what was it like?
Yeah, it was an amazing experience, definitely like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Have you ever done anything as big or as public as that before?
No, definitely not. That was definitely my biggest performance and probably one of the biggest of my life, to be honest.
How were the nerves?
Yeah, to be honest, I was pretty nervous in the rehearsals, but it felt pretty natural to get up there and just play when it was on the night, to be honest.
And Duncan, why this song?
Well, we usually try and figure out a piece of music that suits the year group quite well. So we do a finale, big item at each of our prize givings, but this year's, particularly Year 12 and 13, there's a lot of good guitarists and drummers and really emphasis on rock with them. And so we wanted to do something which sort of could blend that and also use our school orchestra and our choir. And this arrangement that we came across, which was from the band Heart, who did it as part of a tribute concert to Led Zeppelin. We came across that on YouTube this time last year, and so we got it arranged for our orchestra, and that's basically how it worked out, and it was the right piece of music for the right year group, so it came together really well.
Boy, did it what. Hey, James, did you know Stairway to Heaven before this?
Yeah, that was probably one of the first songs I actually learnt on guitar, so luckily I didn't need a lot of rehearsing to learn it.
So how much work did go into it? How much practice did you put in?
Well, as the whole orchestra and everything, we probably started a few months beforehand, and we only really put it together really 3 days before the actual finale.
Yeah, all the groups were rehearsing separately. The orchestra, we have a conductor, Mark Hodgkinson, that was rehearsing the orchestra since sort of midterm 3, and I was working with the rock bands and the choirs along with a couple of other tutors. But yeah, it was 3 days before the prize give. We finally brought everyone together to see what it was, how all the bits would fit together.
Hang on a minute, Duncan. So you had not put all the components together to have a run through until 3 days before you went on stage for the big night.
Yeah, that's right. But we've got good musicians here, and we're pretty confident that we're going to do a good job. We've done big numbers like this quite a lot before, and we do 2 big musicals at our school every year, which often we did The Little Mermaid in term 3 or term 4 that had 18 musicians in it, and so we're kind of used to putting on big productions. So yeah, we had 100% confidence that it was going to go really well. But yes, the response is really blowing us away.
So James, how long have you been playing guitar for? How old are you?
I'm 17 and I've been playing for around 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, and what do you like about it?
I just enjoy getting up on stage and playing in front of everyone. It's like my happy place, really. And just listening to all my favourite songs and just going out there and learning and playing them, that's really what I enjoy doing.
That is fantastic. Now, this video, obviously we spotted the video and other people have as well. Duncan, I mean, what has happened with that video? How many people have looked at it? What kind of response have you had?
Well, it's been amazing. I mean, we had look, we weren't even going to record it properly. I just at the last minute decided to plug the laptop into the sound desk at the venue and think we might as well record the audio as well. We didn't really think much was going to come of it. Spent a day or two putting it together with our video guy. We even lost a whole bunch of the video footage. A corrupted hard drive destroyed all our wide angles. So I put an email out to parents asking them to upload all their phone footage. So any wide angles you see in the videos from people's iPhones, basically. And so anyway, put it together a couple of days and chucked it up online. And yeah, lo and behold, within 12 hours, it had got 12,000 views and thought, oh, that's decent. Okay, that's nice. And I think, I don't know, I mean, I haven't actually checked all afternoon. I've been a bit busy, but I think we're around about 170,000 views so far. So it's surprising how many people overseas are commenting on it, and we're hearing from other people not connected with the school that in different countries that are really sort of blown away by it. So it's obviously really the right song for the right time, and people are really connecting with it.
No pressure. So what do you do next time then to top that?
No, I've got a couple of ideas up my sleeve.
Oh, have you? Can you give us a taster? Give us a clue. Give us a clue, Duncan.
No, I can't share it with you. I haven't even told my staff yet.
Oh, come on. What about you, James? Do you see, is guitar playing a hobby, or do you see it being more than that? What's your future?
Well, I always think guitar will be a part of me. I'm not sure really what my future looks like in terms of career, but it's definitely something I'll continue with in the future.
It's fantastic to talk to you both. It was an amazing performance. Thank you so much for your time. That is St Andrew's Head of Music, Duncan Ferguson, and guitarist James McIver there. If you haven't seen it, I think we can probably put a link to it on our website. It is pretty amazing. About 120 of them all on stage at the same time. And as I said, didn't come together as a group until 3 days beforehand. Pretty amazing. Lots of feedback coming in on Air New Zealand. This person saying, why does there need to be an algorithm for pricing tickets? I wonder how many cheap tickets are actually available before the algorithm kicks in.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Tēnā tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Te Pāti Māori says protests planned for tomorrow will be a sign of what Māori can do over the next 3 years. The Nationwide Action Day will protest the new government's policies, such as the proposed Treaty Principles Bill, scaling back the use of te reo in the public service and scrapping the Māori Health Authority. The protests are timed to coincide with the formal opening of Parliament. Te Pāti Māori co-leader Debbie Ngārewa-Paka says the protest is more about Māori showing up for each other and uniting.
What we have is our people mobilising for the next 3 years against and letting known what they think about governments that are utilising tangata whenua as their reason for politicking, as their reason to hold our growth back, the reason that we shouldn't be thriving.
Debbie Ngārewa-Paka says the protest was organised in the space of 72 hours. Labour's finance spokesperson is rubbishing claims from the government that he found ways to make the books look better than they are. The new Finance Minister, Nicola Willis, is accusing the previous government of committing to a number of long-term programs, but only funding them for the short term. She says the cost of covering them over the forecast period could cost billions of dollars. But her predecessor, Grant Robertson, says time-limited funding has been used by previous governments, including the last National Government.
I inherited a number of time-limited pieces of funding. And what you do at each budget is you go back and you look and say, well, are we going to extend that? Are we going to baseline it? Are we going to look at another way of doing it? This is literally the job that Nicola Willis has signed up for, and she seems to think it's some kind of scandal.
Grant Robertson says Nicola Willis is being desperate. Police investigating the death of baby Rue in Lower Hutt say a hard drive used to record CCTV footage was deliberately removed from where he lived. The toddler died just before his second birthday after suffering violent injuries at a home in the suburb of Taita. Detective Inspector Nick Pritchard says the hard drive and power unit were taken from the property and then hidden or disposed of. Mr Pritchard says attempts were made to clean and alter the crime scene before police arrived. He says police are also seeking information about a piece of fabric tied around Rue's neck when he was taken to hospital. The head of the Israeli military says its ground operation is now underway in southern Gaza following the breakdown of the week-long truce. The BBC's Paul Adams reports.
The army is still fighting street battles in the north, in and around Gaza City, where Hamas units are disjointed but still putting up resistance. But the presence of Israeli forces, including tanks, east and north of the city of Khan Yunis, suggests they may soon try and cut off another third of the Gaza Strip, gradually squeezing what remains of Hamas's fighting units into the far south. But the consequences for Gaza's civilian population, including an estimated 1.8 million displaced people, seem dire.
Police have lifted cordons around 2 central Wellington streets. Suspicious packages had earlier been found outside the US and Israeli embassies. Crystal Gibbons reports.
Police say the cordons around Brandon Street and Fitzherbert Terrace have been lifted following the Defence Force bomb squad clearing both embassies. They say neither item posed any risk, but they will continue investigating them. 5 schools were put in lockdown earlier as a precaution. People RNZ spoke to on Lambton Quay by the Brandon Street cordon said they were shocked to see the road blocked off by police tape. Some were unable to get to stores within the cordon and others were unable to get to their cars.
A St John manager was trying to coordinate the ambulance response to the Christchurch terror attack while also chairing a teleconference of senior managers. The chaotic call was this morning played to the inquest into the 51 deaths resulting from the March 2019 mosque shootings. St John Duty Centre manager Bruce Chubb was talking to colleagues around him as other managers asked him to mute his phone.
It's too noisy. We need to put somebody down. Sorry, Bruce needs to go on YouTube. So again, please.
Okay. Have you activated Christchurch first? And do you require North Island assistance of that type?
Bruce, mute, please. He's not listening.
It took paramedics about half an hour to enter Al Noor Mosque to assist victims. The Minister of Corrections says the country's prisons will be properly staffed and able to take on as many prisoners as needed as the government gets tough on crime. Corrections is short around 370 prison officers despite an intensive recruitment campaign. Minister Mark Mitchell says modelling shows there will be 300 to 400 more prisoners in the next 12 months. He told Checkpoint he's confident the recruitment campaign is working.
We're going to continue with that recruitment drive and try and attract, Kiwis into what is fundamentally a very important job, one that doesn't always get the public recognition that it deserves.
The country's prisons have 11,000 beds, but staff shortages mean only around 900,500 can be used. And finally, a husband and wife from Wales have been keeping a live 100-year-old naval shell as a garden ornament. The couple say the shell apparently had originally been retrieved from a beach used for Royal Navy target practice, but they thought it was a dummy. Here's the BBC's David Grundy.
So this thing they'd been using as an ornament was actually a 64-pound, 29-kilo naval projectile. Sian, who's a keen gardener, used to bang her trowel on the bomb to get the soil off it. It was taken to a disused quarry about 5 miles away where it was covered in 5 tonnes of sand and then detonated.
That's the news.
Pacific Waves.
Bringing Kiribati back into the forum.
Diving into the big stories of the region.
They are an instrument of the Constitution of Fiji.
And shining a light on issues affecting Pacific peoples in Aotearoa and around the world.
Being able to go out into different places and areas that share special connections with our community was really special.
We tala noa to Pacific leaders, newsmakers, experts and commentators and bring you up-to-date coverage from our dedicated RNZ Pacific team and talented correspondents on the ground in the region. Pacific Waves at 8:15 weeknights on RNZ National.
You're back on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Scattered rain today and showers tomorrow. Thunderstorms and hail possible during the afternoons and evenings. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered rain with thunderstorms possible about the ranges, easing in Hawke's Bay tomorrow evening. Whanganui to Wellington, also for Wairarapa, mostly cloudy. A few light showers today and and a few spots of rain about the Tararua district tomorrow morning. Nelson, Buller and Westland. Scattered showers in Nelson and Buller, but fine in Westland. Mainly fine throughout tomorrow, apart from isolated showers about the ranges. Marlborough and Canterbury. Patchy drizzle clearing tomorrow morning, then mainly fine. Mainly fine weather also for Otago and Southland. A few light coastal showers today. Fiordland, fine weather, and Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, a few light showers today. The time is 8 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Welcome to Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. 12 years after the CTV building collapsed during the Christchurch earthquake, families of the victims killed inside have told an engineering disciplinary hearing they want justice and accountability. 115 people died when the 6-storey building came down in February 2011. A complaint against an engineer whose firm designed the building is being heard by an Engineering New Zealand disciplinary committee. Dr. Alan Ray lost a High Court bid to stop the hearing, Anna Sargent reports.
The chair of the disciplinary committee, Andrew McMenamin, opened the hearing by acknowledging the victims killed in the CTV building.
We do have members of the CTV families with us here today, and I want to acknowledge their presence in particular. In acknowledgement of that tragedy, I would ask you all to join the committee in a minute's silence to reflect and remember those who lost their lives and those whose lives were changed forever.
The building was designed by Alan Ray's engineering firm in the 1980s. In 2012, the Earthquake Royal Commission found that one of Dr. Ray's employees, David Harding, made fundamental errors when he designed the building and criticised Dr. Ray for handing sole responsibility for it to the inexperienced employee. The same year, the Ministry of Business and 54 family members of those who died made complaints about both men. Mr. McMenamin says the complaint relates to the standard of engineering practice in the 80s.
Over the next few days, you will hear us attempt to understand what were the expected professional standards at the time and, based on those standards, whether Dr. Ray failed to adequately supervise Mr. Harding.
The committee will decide whether there are grounds for disciplining Dr. Ray and, if so, whether it can impose any penalties. Maan Al-Kasi lost his wife in the building collapse and is a spokesperson for the CTV families. He told the hearing via video that the families want to see justice served.
The families have been waiting for accountability and the findings of a disciplinary process for 12 years, a waiting which has prevented closure.
Mr. Al-Kasi says years on, many still struggle with the tragedy.
Some victims were buried alive, others were cut into pieces. In the case of some of our loved ones, no traces could be found, not even DNA that could identify them.
A media statement released on behalf of Alan Ray says the disciplinary hearing into the collapse has become a witch hunt and serves no public interest. The statement, via Dr. Ray's lawyers, says Dr. Ray strongly denies the allegations at the centre of the complaint. The words have been voiced.
The complaint focuses on employment procedures in the mid-1980s, some 40 years ago, a time when standard employment practices, including the degree of supervision of employed senior engineers, differed markedly from that of today. All other complaints against Dr. Ray have been dismissed.
The statement says David Harding was not a junior engineer and was instead a registered senior engineer with 13 years of post-graduation experience by the time he designed the CTV building. It says Dr. Ray has repeatedly offered to meet with the CTV families, but the offer has always been refused by IPENS, now known as Engineering New Zealand.
The delays have been stressful for the CTV families and for Dr. Ray and his family. While recognising that the desire for accountability for the CTV building tragedy is entirely understandable, Dr. Ray believes he has been an easy target to blame.
The statement says Dr. Ray, who is 82, has been unwell for some time and is medically unfit to attend the hearing. The hearing continues tomorrow.
It is 12 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Israel Defence Forces has announced it's expanding its ground operations to the whole of the Gaza Strip. Israel has been bombarding Gaza following the collapse of its ceasefire with Hamas at the weekend. The IDF says it has destroyed about 500 tunnel shafts during its offensive. According to the Hamas-controlled health ministry in Gaza, more than 15,000 people have been killed there since Israel began its operation in early October. CNN's Ben Wederman filed this report and a warning it contains distressing content.
This is Gaza City's Ahli Baptist Hospital, where the wounded are treated in the open on wooden pallets. The emergency ward is already jammed. The courtyard is full of body bags. Dozens were killed in a series of Israeli strikes Saturday, many more still under the rubble. Israel claims one of those strikes killed a senior Hamas commander who helped plan the 7 October attacks. He was, perhaps, one dead among many, many others. This woman lost her daughter and grandchildren and names them all. And may God judge those watching us die, she cries. It's a similar scene in Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in central Gaza. More wounded. Many of them children. And more dead. Many of them children. They bombed an entire street, says Saad. He pulled his brother Muhammad from under the rubble. But his brother Muhammad was dead. Says Saad, let me say goodbye to him. My father's been killed, cries this boy after a strike on the Jabalia refugee camp Sunday. The 7-day truce seems like the distant past.
Ukrainian forces are being warned to prepare for another tough winter and a difficult year ahead. Multiple intelligence officials have told CNN that their assessments show a deadlock on the front lines with little change expected over the coming months. In order to gain the upper hand, Ukrainian authorities say they need to be able to match Russian air power and are calling for fighter planes to be delivered now, not next spring when they're due to arrive. CNN's Anna Corin reports.
As a harsh winter begins to set in, Ukraine's war is becoming more difficult, painful and exhausting as this conflict grinds towards the end of its second year. A stalemate is how General Zaluzhny, Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, labelled the war, making international headlines while upsetting President Zelensky, who projects a far more upbeat assessment. But in a rare interview, Zaluzhny's senior advisor, General Nazarov, tells me his boss stands by those controversial comments.
General Zaluzhny was just giving an honest assessment of the war, which was a wake-up call, I think, to the West.
Yes, I agree with you. It was some kind of message and some kind of alarm signal for Western politicians and for Western society. But we are ready to fight with not our enemy, but we need help, we need support.
Equipment is what Ukraine desperately needs. Artillery pieces, ammunition, long-range missile systems, specifically ATACMS, drones, electronic warfare and air defence systems. Last weekend, Kyiv experienced how vital those air defence systems are at protecting the population, when Russia launched what local officials called an unprecedented number of attack drones on the capital. The general fears if Ukraine doesn't receive advanced weaponry, this country faces a very difficult 2024.
General, is there one specific weapon that would be a game changer in this war?
I don't think so, but importance of F-16 is that the I believe, that help us to change situation concerning the Russian air superiority on the front line.
The problem, however, is that Ukraine needs those F-16s now, not in spring of next year when they're due to arrive. But as Russia steps up its military production on an industrial scale, General Nazarov's biggest fear is whether the West has the patience for what is turning out to be a much longer war.
There are concerns that the West is losing interest in this war and the support is waning, especially in the US amongst Republicans. What is your message to those Republicans?
American support is vital for Ukrainian, really vital. It's very important for us. What I want to send to Republicans, we need to understand that now we have problem to conduct this war, but if we don't manage to win this war, we in future will have more problems, not only for our country, for my country, for our populations, but only for Europe as a whole. It will be a problem for the United States also.
Amid big promises about renewable energy, the COP28 summit has been overshadowed by the host, questioning the need to phase out fossil fuels. The summit is being hosted by the United Arab Emirates, one of the world's major oil producers, which has vowed to triple its renewable energy capacity. But can participants agree to phase out fossil fuels and cut carbon emissions when COP28 President Sultan Jaber says doing so will take the world back to caves? The ABC's Nicole Johnston reports.
It's been a controversial summit, a meeting of world leaders and climate campaigners in the heart of the Arabian Gulf, one of the biggest oil and gas producing regions in the world. The president of COP28 is Sultan Al Jaber, the head of the United Arab Emirates national oil company ADNOC. And now former US Vice President and climate advocate Al Gore has slammed the host, saying Al Jaber can't be an honest broker.
They have captured the COP process itself now and overreached, abusing the public's trust by naming the CEO of one of the largest and least responsible oil companies in the world as head of the COP. It's an abuse of the public's right to have confidence in the processes by which the decisions about humanity's future are made.
More than 100 countries already support phasing out fossil fuels. This week, climate delegates will debate whether a final agreement on this can be reached. But COP President Sultan Al Jaber said last month that phasing out fossil fuels would take the world back into caves. Meanwhile, more than 115 countries have vowed to triple their investment in renewable energy by 2030. Tim Buckley is the Director of Climate Energy Finance. He says it's a strong start to the conference.
A tripling of renewable energy capacity, depending on when the start date is, will be a game changer. Like, at the end of the day, China is installing 20,000 megawatts of wind and solar every month right now. America's got the Inflation Reduction Act. That's starting to dramatically change the level of installation of new capacity over in America. And Europe, on the back of Putin, has gone into a step change. So it is largely in train already, but it's great to see the start of the COP with a serious level of ambition.
Tim Buckley says the other important area for Australia is reducing the country's emissions from methane, which comes from agricultural production, mainly livestock.
Australia is one of the largest methane emitters in the world, and so far we've seen no action on it. So that's going to be an area where greater focus on methane would have very significant implications for Australia. And Minister Bowen wants to come out as one of the good guys, to use his own words. He's going to actually have to probably elaborate on what Australia is going to do.
Meanwhile, 50 of the world's top fossil fuel companies, representing a third of global oil and gas production, have agreed to eliminate emissions from their operations by the middle of the century, giving them 27 years to get it done.
All right, let's go to some of your feedback now. Seems appropriate off the back of that package to discuss our interview earlier in the program with Greg Foran, the boss of Air New Zealand. This person says, COP28, great time to be discussing flights. I look forward to the charges reflecting the true cost to the planet. Another person agrees, everyone is worried about climate change, but relatively few are willing to make changes to their lifestyle, as evidenced by the demand for airline travel. Another says, flights to WOW in Wellington are always more expensive than at any other time. And another listener says, what if the buses charged for seats the way Air New Zealand does? The fuller the bus, the more expensive your ride, says Liz. Another says, $1,000 from Sydney to Melbourne, never, not even close. Don't let him get away with sweeping statements. Mark Mitchell, Minister for Corrections, he was on earlier in the program. Recruiting corrections officers. He hopes to have enough of them to put more people in jail. This person says prison is a moral and fiscal failure. That is a quote from Bill English, indeed. Mark Mitchell is all talk, says another person. And I think we've got time for one more. It sounded like Mark Mitchell was praising the recruitment and policing put into the place by previous government, tough on law and order, making a mountain out of a molehill, perchance, says Gail. Thank you for your feedback. After more than 14 days of multiple sporting events, it was the French territory of New Caledonia that walked away champions of the Pacific with 82 gold medals to win their 14th Pacific Games title. Out of the 24 countries taking part, 23 left Solomon Islands with a medal, and the hosts came tantalisingly close to a coveted gold medal in the men's soccer final against New Caledonia. The ABC's Christian Retta or Manu Long reports from the Solomon Islands.
For 90 minutes, it was a tense affair in the Honiara's mid-morning heat. It came down to penalty kicks. Solomon Islands losing in penalty kicks to a better New Caledonia outfit. The hosts missing out on a gold medal in the one sport that mattered, soccer.
What was meant to be a good afternoon for many turned out to be an excellent afternoon for New Caledonia.
From despair to celebration, Solomon Islands mesmerizing the Pacific family in a spectacular closing night of music and colour.
They don't call it the Friendly Isles for nothing. Everyone has been so hospitable. Everything is lovely, the environment, and the food. I love the market. Is probably my favorite place.
It's beautiful. The organization was great. We can make a good competition with great organization. Lodgement are good, and people who organize benevolence, all is very good.
It was great. Solomon is a great island. What did you enjoy about the Solomon? The weather and their food and their handicraft.
A judging panel consisting of representatives of the sports, the nations, the athletes and the media have deliberated today. The best female athlete with 3 gold medals from the sport of weightlifting, representing Solomon Islands, Jenny Tegu Winnie.
Weightlifters Jenny Winnie from the Solomons and Fiji's Taniela Rainimbongi scooping the Best Female and Male Athlete Awards at the closing ceremony. Solomon's Iron Lady Winnie says the Solomon Islands has proven that it can host any event like this in future.
It's been a great event, and now it's the closing. So, all is done, and we win so much medals. So it's a great event for our country as history.
Millions of dollars of donor and government funds were pumped into hosting the games, often at the expense of other services such as health. Medical Association President Dr. Pedikol Togamai is among those voicing their concern. He says the well-being of health workers is at risk, with delayed refurbishment work forcing patients to be treated in tents.
I don't want my members to continue to work in a hazardous environment because that will affect their mentality, psychologically, and eventually they will get sick. And that's the point that I don't want my members to reach.
The chapel at King's College at the University of Cambridge is famous for, amongst other things, its festival of 9 lessons and carols, broadcast across Britain and the world. But the 600-year-old building has added a modern and controversial feature to its roof: hundreds of solar panels. The BBC's Johnny Diamond went to Cambridge to take a look.
Inside the chapel of King's College, Cambridge, a vaulted palace of carved stone and stained glass. History and faith walk hand in hand. But up, above the beautiful stone ceiling, there is a rather ungodly hammering. On the newly restored roof of the chapel, modern is meeting ancient as solar panels are fitted to this old building. Gillian Tett is the provost of King's College.
The decision to install the solar panels was really taken for 2 reasons. It was done to partly provide power or electricity for the chapel, but also to provide a potent symbol of the need to rethink how we operate, how we live, how we organise ourselves in the face of climate change.
You'll be aware there will be critics out there. There are critics out there who say this is just the world's biggest piece of virtue signalling.
To which we would say that yes, it's a symbol of our desire to change. And symbols matter. They're very important.
So I stepped outside the chapel and outside the walls of the college because it is time to make the long climb up to the roof. On either side of the sloping roof, there is the framework for the photovoltaic cells that will be laid across it, and there's cabling and metallic frame that will hold the cells and feed the power back down to the ground.
So I'm Stephen Cherry, I'm the Dean of Chapel here. Johnny, it's good to welcome you to the roof of this amazing place and this astonishing view. We can have almost 500 solar panels up here, and these, together with a few more around this main campus, will end up producing about 5.5% of our electricity needs in just the central part of the college. And that in turn means that that energy is not going to be produced in a way that generates greenhouse gases.
It does help that from up here you'll see them. From down there, you'd really have to work very hard to know that they were on top of the roof, weren't you?
Yes, we did a few trials and we have moved the panels slightly down the slope. They will be evident, but I don't think they will add up to a disfigurement.
Are you excited about blazing a trail?
I am excited because I think this has got to be part of a transformation in mindset and mentality, which allows us to look at our opportunities to spread out the responsibility for generating energy.
That's us, but ko te kaupapa tuatahi pōpō from tomorrow at 5 a.m. First up does some mini budgeting with Finance Minister Nicola Willis, and they hear from demonstrators protesting over the new government's stand on te tiriti.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. Police investigating the death of a Lower Hutt baby say a computer hard drive used to record CCTV footage at his home was deliberately removed. Baby Roo died shortly before his 2nd birthday. Te Pāti Māori says tomorrow's nationwide action day is about Māori showing up for each other and uniting. The protest coincides with the formal opening of Parliament and is